Christianity, the world's largest religion. Being the middle child of the three primary Abrahamic siblings, Christianity demonstrates remarkable diversity in sects and rites, with divergences in the faith being as old as the faith itself. These sectarian schisms continued for centuries after Christianity's inception, culminating in great councils of prominent bishops from across the vast Christian world coming together in an attempt to resolve the theological and liturgical disputes that were dividing their religion. These councils are known for shifting the trajectory of Christianity and causing major schisms that have lasted to this day. They also give us a peek into the vibrant philosophy of Christianity during this period, regale us with very amusing anecdotes by famous theologians considered saints by many Christians today, and provide us with insight into the politics of the Roman Empire and beyond from between the 1st to the 7th centuries AD. Welcome to our video on early Christian church councils, where we will explore the stories of the early faith's fiercest rivalries and provide an overview of the ancient gatherings that shaped the world's largest religion in ways that still impact its 2.4 billion worshippers worldwide today. This video is made available for free thanks to our YouTube members and patrons. We fund our free content through our program of exclusive videos made for our members and patrons, who get 2 documentaries per week not available to the public. We've got a growing collection featuring the First Punic War, the history of Prussia, the Italian Unification Wars, and a review of the classic text Xenophon's Anabasis. We're now covering the Russo-Japanese War and Albigensian Crusades, not to mention our massive Pacific War week-by-week coverage, and a massive pool of other projects. All this is made for and with generous donations from our backers, so if you're enjoying our content and want to see more and support the cause of history, consider becoming a YouTube member or patron. You'll also get early access to public content, a spot in our lively Discord server, and behind-the-scenes info and goodies. We rely on our backers to support our growing team pumping out these videos, so thank you to everyone already involved, and we hope you'll consider joining in too. Before we discuss the early church councils and the religious schisms that sprung from them, we must dispel the idea that the early church before these councils was a united body, or that it had an original creed from which these heresies diverged. Christianity had humble roots, beginning as a small community in Jerusalem in the 1st century AD, comprised predominantly of Jewish people, before spreading throughout the Near East in subsequent centuries. Christianity grew out of Jewish communities, which were accustomed to following Jewish law in matters of diet, circumcision, and social conduct. Christianity and Judaism also worshipped the same God, so it was hard to know what had changed in terms of obligations towards God. Thus, as Christianity picked up converts from among the Roman Empire's many Gentile populations, the original Jewish members of the Christian community were faced with a conundrum. Did Jewish law apply to Gentiles who converted to Christianity? Contention over how or if Jewish law should be enforced among Christians continued among certain elements of the Jewish Christian community, resulting in the creation of Judeo-Christian splinter sects, such as the Ebionites, Nazarenes, and Elkosites. This serves to support the point that Christianity has always been a faith interpreted in many different ways by many different peoples, even from its earliest days. Later theological debates would focus on the nature of Christ, and in what ways he is human and in what way he is divine. This may seem trivial to us, but for Christians of the time, it was important for them to understand in order to practice the faith properly, and then achieve salvation, as well as what salvation actually meant for both their bodies and their souls. Throughout the rest of the 1st century CE, an astounding diversity of Christian or Christian-adjacent groups continued to emerge. Some of these groups fell under the umbrella of Gnosticism. These groups often had their own texts and dualist theologies, but they are too diverse to list here. These Gnostic groups existed alongside other divergent Christian sects, like the Marcionites. The Marcionites were followers of the titular theologian Marcion, who claimed that the Jewish God was evil and different from the Christian God. Unlike other Christian sects that considered the Old Testament canon, Marcion declared that the Jewish texts were not canonical. Another Christian sect that existed around this time was the Docetists, who believed that Jesus' body was not real but an illusion. During the early Christian period, no standardized canon of Christian texts existed, and Christians had not set up any criteria as to what they considered canon. By the 1st and 2nd centuries CE, All of these groups had begun to write down liturgical texts codifying their beliefs, and as such, rival canons of what the Christian Bible was meant to be began to emerge. As Christianity grew in size and reach, these debates grew ever more intense. Consequently, various regional councils emerged, like the one in Carthage in 251 CE, where Cyprian of Carthage, an important regional bishop, set terms for how much penance people who lapsed from the church would do before readmission. This was important because many Christians who were persecuted would temporarily renounce their faith, which, while understandable in the face of persecution, meant that the rest of the church had to see whether and under what circumstances they could return to receive communion. During this period, emperors like Diocletian were persecuting Christians, seeing them as convenient scapegoats. Slowly, and as the persecutions of Diocletian gave way to the Edict of Milan under Constantine the Great, which enabled freedom of worship across the Roman Empire and largely ended Christian persecutions, various regional hubs of vibrant Christian activity arose in cities like Athens, Alexandria, Jerusalem, Rome, Carthage, and Antioch. These hubs of Christianity displayed significant internal and cross-regional diversity in how they interpreted their faith. By this time, the various competing church canons had become more crystallized, but there were still major points of contention among different sects. Before long, these major debates would erupt in the First Ecumenical Council. The First Ecumenical Council took place in the late spring and early summer of 325 CE, and was traditionally said to have been convoked and mediated by Emperor Constantine I. This marks the beginning of imperial involvement in Christian affairs, which cemented the growth of Christianity and set a precedent that many emperors and kings in Europe followed. There were many things on the agenda, such as when Easter should be celebrated, the ordination of eunuchs, and other small matters. However, the biggest debate, and the one that the council is known for, is the controversy over the views of the Alexandrian-based priest called Arius and his umbrella of followers. Arius was in dispute with the other influential Alexandrian clergymen, such as the famous theologian Athanasius of Alexandria and his followers, over the nature of Christ and his relation to the Father, for which he had been excommunicated from Alexandria and forced to flee to Palestine. Despite his exile, Arius's teachings accumulated a significant following among certain elements of the early Christian community, becoming known as Arianism. Arianism was a school of thought that considered God the Father to pre-exist God the Son, known also as Jesus. Arius's opponents decried these teachings, claiming that if true, it would mean that Christ the Son was a limited being. The Council of Nicaea, which was attended by multiple bishops, including both Athanasius and Arius, debated this under imperial auspices. By hosting this conclave, Emperor Constantine was attempting to ensure that Christianity, an up-and-coming religion that emperors could rely on for imperial cohesion and royal legitimation, was relatively united. In the ensuing arguments, the followers of Arianism asserted that Christ, or God the Son, should be referred to as homoousios, meaning someone who had a similar substance to God the Father. This, they felt, was the only way to show the proper distinction between Father and Son, two entities they asserted required theological separation. On the other side, the anti-Arians declared that Christ shouldn't be called homoousios, one who has the same substance as the Father, which they claimed showed that both persons were co-eternal, as opposed to that of the Arians, which they claimed made the Son a creation of the Father. Constantine was not a theologian and did not take a side, instead trying to steer everyone to a consensus. Unfortunately, the Arians and anti-Arians were so polarized against one another that the emperor's attempts to mediate between them were futile. Despite initial moderation amongst many bishops, the Arian and anti-Arian camps poured oil on the flames and increased the chasm. As the debates at Nicaea continued, Athanasius gradually gained the upper hand over Arius, slowly getting his fellow bishops over to his side and managing to form a creed based around him, the early Nicene Creed, a proclamation of the main doctrines of the Christian faith that many Christians recite today. This Nicene Creed was shorter than the Nicene Creed of today, with later councils down the line cementing and refining its composition. After the First Council of Nicaea, Arius was left politically isolated, having lost the council's favour. The emergence of the Nicene Creed at the First Council of Nicaea as the glue that held together the majority of the churches of the Christian world was the beginning of modern mainstream Christianity. However, the First Council of Nicaea did not spell the end for Arius' political relevance. Not long after its conclusion, the rogue churchman was recalled to regain communion in Constantinople due to the influence of Emperor Constantius II, the son of Constantine the Great, who, like his father before him, attempted to orchestrate a compromise between the Arians and anti-Arians. This went nowhere, as both sides remained bitterly divided on the matter, with Constantius being seen as a semi-Arian heretic in modern mainstream Christianity. Arianism would even spread to Germanic tribes due to Arian missionaries sent by Bishop Eusebius, and remained popular within the borders of the empire for a couple of centuries until the 4th to 5th centuries CE. Indeed, while the traditional narrative is that Christianity was largely united under the Nicene Creed after the First Council of Nicaea, the reality is that the Christian faith remained diverse and unsettled for a long time afterwards. However, the eventual victory of the Nicene Creed shows that the First Council of Nicaea was still an important event, for it set the terms for later theological debates that would occur amongst mainstream Christian leaders. Regional divides continued in the church, and many failed councils occurred without gaining much legitimacy, like the one in Serdica, modern-day Sofia, where Constantius II tried and failed to unify the church. The First Council of Constantinople and the Second Ecumenical Council occurred in 381 CE under the auspices of Emperor Theodosius. During this time, new strands of thought emerged, like Apollinarianism, which claimed that Christ had a human body and soul but a divine mind, and Sabellianism, which claimed that the three beings of the Trinity were not distinct. These schools of thought were condemned, as was Arianism once more. There was also a division of which bishoprics were honoured. While Rome and Jerusalem retained an honoured status due to the former being founded by apostles like Paul and the latter being the birthplace of Jesus, Constantinople also gained an official status as an honoured church. As we can see, various heterodox and orthodox figures went in and out of state favour, and this would continue in the later councils. The regional and philosophical divides in Christianity continued after 381 CE, as is common with any religious tradition. While the early church councils were recorded and codified based on specific standards, other debates emerged. Like earlier theological debates, these ones centered on how much of Christ's nature, will, or body was divine or human. Other debates were on other matters, such as the debate between two significant theologians, Augustine of Hippo, a famous bishop from Carthage, and Pelagius, a British bishop, on the nature of the original sin. In essence, Augustine and Pelagius contested the role of the sin Adam committed by eating the fruit of knowledge in Genesis, and how much it weighs on subsequent human generations. Another point in their debate was the relationship between how much help from God humans received from the aforementioned divine grace, and how much of humanity's good actions were the result of their own free will. Some regional councils continued, like the Council of Carthage in 411 CE. This council centered around the controversy of the Donatists, a group of Christians who were very harsh on people who sinned, and demanded public humiliation for readmission into the church. The Donatists were condemned by Augustine's anti-Donatist faction, with full imperial backing, an example of politicking influencing religious development. The next ecumenical council would occur in 431 CE in the eastern city of Ephesos. Amongst the topics of debate were the aforementioned Pelagian doctrines and more ongoing debates revolving around how Christ's human and divine natures relate to each other. Two major camps had been formed, with one led by Cyril, Bishop of Alexandria, and the other led by Nestorius, the Bishop of Constantinople. Cyril held the same view as today's Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant churches, that Mary should be called Theotokos, or God-bearer, and that the divine and human natures of Christ were fundamentally united. Nestorius held that Mary giving birth to God compromised God's timelessness, and that Mary should be called Christotokos, or Christ-bearer. Thus, he considered Christ's human nature to be distinct from his divine one, with the former being a sort of incarnation of the latter. Because of his views, Nestorius had been accused of heresy by Cyril and excommunicated by Pope Celestine of Rome. The council began in May of 431 CE. A kangaroo court, stacked heavily with bishops favourable to Cyril, ultimately voted to condemn Nestorius. Nestorius' followers responded by making their own counter-council to condemn Cyril. As bile was slung from both sides of the fence, both Cyrillites and Nestorians accused the other of harbouring heresies in their doctrines. Even accusations of Arianism were bandied about, despite it having lost much of its appeal in the East by the 5th century CE. The two councils continued separately, making their own canons by July 431 CE. This caused a major schism between the followers of Nestorius and the rest of the church. Both the followers of Nestorius and Cyril appealed to the emperor. However, the emperor was wary of taking sides, and thus had both Cyril and Nestorius exiled. Cyril eventually returned to Alexandria, while Nestorius went to an Antiochian and later Egyptian monastery to live out the rest of his days. However, these divides continued to cause controversy amongst the empire. Nestorianism, for its part, spread to Iraq, the Sasanian Empire, Central Asia, and even China with relative success, being present in those regions for the next millennium at the very least. As the debates continued, a reaction to Nestorianism called Monophysitism emerged. This sect held an opposing view. Rather than seeing Christ's two natures as separate, they proposed that Christ only had a divine nature, and that his human nature was absorbed into it, thus emphasizing the divinity of Christ. This is slightly different from another philosophy that emerged during this time, called Monophysitism, which held that Christ has one human-divine merged nature, a sort of human-god hybrid being. Others still, later to be called Chalcedonians, thought both Monophysitism and Monophysitism were heretical, and that Christ had two inseparable human and divine natures, which were united but did not merge. The Second Council of Ephesos occurred in 449 CE to repudiate Nestorianism further, but many rejected it due to its monophysite tendencies. This resulted in the most seminal council of late antiquity, the Council of Chalcedon, held in October of 451 CE, and attended by two opposing camps, the Chalcedonians and the Monophysites. The two camps began to debate fiercely, as the minutes of Ephesos were recited, to booing and cries of support by opposing bishops. Eventually, Dioscoros and his allies, representing Egypt, were deposed by acclamation, or voting by shouting, a common voting method of all councils. 2 days later, the status of Monophysitism was debated formally, and a collection of tomes, as well as proposed expansions of the Council of Nicaea, were proposed condemning the Monophysite dogma, all of which were accepted except for a certain tome of Pope Leo, considered to be too Nestorian initially, but then accepted. Emperor Marcian wished to find a consensus, and thus helped the Alexandrian faction regain its debate position, but the decision was to be left to the council itself. Eventually, the council presented a new expansion of the Nicene Creed, with the backing of Rome and Constantinople, which was to be accepted to the dismay of both Syrian and Egyptian bishops. It was actually slightly deviating from the late Cyril's ideas of Christology, as it rebuked some of his anathemas, but it passed and was accepted. The opposing bishops left, and then continued to oppose Chalcedon as heretical, leading to further splits. Eventually, in Egypt, the Monophysites took hold in the non-Chalcedonian sections of society, becoming the ancestors of the Coptic Church. Armenia, which had its own state and distinct trajectory, also did not accept the council, solidifying centuries of theological divergences among the Christians of the Caucasian mountains. In Syria and Palestine, many monks and priests remained staunch anti-Chalcedonians, forming the Syriac Orthodox Church. Meanwhile, in Ethiopia and Eritrea, centuries of disconnect and a different canon of the deuterocanonical texts led to unique Ethiopian and Eritrean Oriental orthodoxies. The churches of the East continue to exist to this day, having profound impacts on the Middle East's cultural tapestry. Despite Chalcedon's eventual theological resolutions, the councils continued to occur until the Islamic Caliphate erupted out of the deserts of Arabia and took over the hubs of Eastern Christianity, cementing the theological separation of the churches of the East due to now being part of separate imperial states. The last ecumenical council both Eastern Orthodox and Catholic Christians accept is the Second Council of Nicaea, where the iconoclast controversy over which imagery should be allowed in churches was solved in favour of the pro-icon faction. 3 centuries later, East and West would break off completely with the infamous Schism of 1054. The early Christian schisms were dramatic, highly philosophical, and highly political affairs. As we have seen, each council could be a whirlwind of drama caused by genuine and sophisticated theological differences. While they may appear bizarre or trivial to us, these councils had real effects on people's lives based on which side of the divide they fell on. It is also a testament to the incredible and vibrant diversity of Christianity, which has various opinions on matters, like any religion. Different sacred languages of liturgy, different rites and architectures, and different approaches to theology were forged by monastic and theological cultural production of the highest caliber. These councils reflect these different approaches. Despite the upsets, counter-persecutions, and divides, the various Christian denominations today are equipped with much knowledge and philosophical developments precisely because of these esoteric debates. The councils reflect both the politics and the culture of these churches, precisely because they brought them to the fore. More videos on religious history are on the way. To ensure you don't miss them, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member-exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.